Buried beneath the Mediterranean Sea lies a layer of solid salt over a mile thick, and it is the fingerprint of the day this entire sea completely disappeared. 5.5 million years ago, the Mediterranean was not a sea at all. It was a vast, scorching desert basin sunk 2 miles below the ocean surface. There were no waves, no ships, and no coastline at all. Just blinding white salt flats, poison lakes, and air so hot and heavy that almost nothing could survive. We only learned this in 1970, when a drilling ship punched a hole into the deep Mediterranean floor and pulled up something impossible. The core was not mud, and it was not sand at all. It was gypsum and rock salt, the kind that only ever forms when seawater evaporates under a blazing open sky. That meant the deepest part of this sea had once been dry land, baking under the open sun, thousands of feet below the surface of the distant Atlantic Ocean. Geologists named it the Messinian salinity crisis, and it began when the narrow gateway between Africa and Spain very slowly squeezed itself completely shut. The Mediterranean is a hungry sea. It loses far more water to evaporation than every river feeding it can possibly replace, including the mighty Nile. Cut off completely from the Atlantic, it simply started to vanish. Scientists estimate the entire basin could have dried out in as little as 1,000 years. The shoreline retreated miles every single year. Ancient ports became dry cliffs, and islands became mountains towering over an empty pit filling with glittering white salt. Down at the very bottom of it all sat brine lakes so salty they would sting like acid, far denser than the Dead Sea, completely lifeless and utterly motionless. The heat down there was almost unimaginable. Air sinking 2 miles below sea level compresses and warms, so the floor may have roasted past 150 degrees. The rivers did not stop flowing, they just fell much further down. The Nile carved a canyon so deep that in places it rivals the Grand Canyon, now buried beneath modern Egypt. That canyon is still down there today, filled with sediment and hidden beneath Cairo, a ghost of the day the Nile emptied into a desert instead of a sea. The Rhone River in France did exactly the same thing, cutting a gorge nearly 3,000 feet deep that is now completely buried and invisible from the surface. In total, the vanishing sea left behind more than 1 million cubic kilometers of solid salt, roughly 6% of all the salt dissolved in every ocean on Earth. Imagine pure salt piled 2 miles thick across an area the size of India. That is what is sitting right now, where fish quietly swim. For roughly 600,000 years, the Mediterranean stayed a dead salt pit. Then one day, right at the edge of Gibraltar, the Atlantic Ocean found a way back in. It probably started as a trickle, water seeping over the rock barrier, cutting a shallow channel, widening it grain by grain, hour after hour. But water that cuts a channel makes that channel bigger, and a bigger channel then carries even more water through it. Once that runaway loop begins, nothing on Earth can stop it. The barrier finally gave way, and the Atlantic fell into the empty Mediterranean in what scientists now call the Zanclean flood, the largest flood in Earth's history. Water roared through that narrow gap at an estimated 100 million cubic meters every single second, roughly 1,000 times the flow of the mighty Amazon River. This was not a waterfall at all. It was a mile-wide river of ocean pouring downhill for over 100 miles, tearing a canyon straight through solid bedrock. Inside the basin, the water level may have climbed more than 30 feet in a single day, every day, for months on end without ever stopping. Some models suggest 90% of the Mediterranean refilled in less than 2 years. A sea the size of a continent, reborn almost overnight. The roar of it would have been heard for hundreds of miles in every direction, and spray and steam rose so high that it very likely changed the weather across the region. And everything since then has lived directly on top of that flood. Every Greek island, every ancient Roman harbor, and every modern beach resort sits above that buried layer of salt. The gateway at Gibraltar is only about 8 miles wide today, and it is still slowly closing because Africa is grinding steadily northward into Europe right now. Which means this is not really ancient history at all. It is a cycle. Somewhere in the deep future, the Mediterranean will very likely dry out all over again. So the next time you swim in that warm blue water, just remember, you are floating a full mile above a buried desert that is patiently waiting to return.